Locked On Rockies, looking back at what can be considered a big move for the Rockies.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 26th day of August. Oh my goodness, October in the year 2022. We're not rough. I wish we could. Well, do we wish we could flash back to the season? Yeah, we still do. We love our Rockies baseball. That's why we talk about it each and every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every single day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, well, guess what? You are in the right place. That's what we do around here is we talk about the Colorado Rockies each and every single day, and we are proud to be your first listen of the day. If you subscribe to Locked On Rockies on YouTube, you can be part of the show. You can hop in the live chat and get your questions answered live, and you can ask stuff. You can chat. You can give me some feedback. You can chime in as well. Your subscription is a great way to help the show grow. And if you're wondering, who the heck is this guy? Well, I'm your Rockies fan extraordinaire, Paul Holden. I've been following this team my entire life and bringing you your daily Rockies talk for over 2 seasons now. Today on Locked On Rockies, we're going to talk about the Randal Grichuk, Raimel Tapia trade, something that I think was an interesting move for the Rockies, and something that when you look at how these two panned out this year, you're kind of in it worked in a sense for the Rockies. The Rockies did get decent production from Randal Grichuk, but what I was disappointed from Randal Grichuk this year was the home runs. Now, he kind of was in line. He's never had a season. He's had one season above 30 home runs. However, he's been sitting in the 20 home runs for most of his career. He hits over 20 home runs in 16, 17, 18, 19, only 12, or he hits 12 in the 2020 season. So if he hits 12 in those 60 games, pretty safe to say that he'd get that 20 again for Toronto there if they were playing a full 162. And then last year in Toronto, 22 home runs, 19 home runs this year. Randal Grichuk's whole purpose for the trade was the Rockies were trading someone who couldn't lift the ball off the ground for someone who was basically living and dying by lifting the ball off the ground. And it was something that I thought we were going to see a little bit more of, but we still got more home run production from Grichuk than Tapia. And when you look at some of their offensive numbers, they're pretty similar. And if you look at them in certain ways, Grichuk was the better offensive player, which is why the Rockies wanted to make that move, but not by a ton. And welcome into the chat, Kenny. I'm glad to have you. I'm a Blue Jays fan tuning in here. I'm curious what your thoughts were on Raimel Tapia, who's someone the Rockies really, really enjoyed. Tapia's career not nearly as long as Grichuk. Well, 2 years more in bigs for Grichuk than Tapia, who's been able to comprise a more compelling career, especially on offense. This was a move that still continued to make sense for the Rockies here as Tapia finishes this year batting .265, .292 for OBP, slugging percentage of .380, and an OPS of .672. And a WAR of .2. Grichuk, on the other hand, Tapia also was able to leave the yard 7 times last year and had 109 hits. Now, Grichuk had more at-bats than Tapia this year at 506 compared to Tapia's 411, but 258-59 batting average, 299 OBP, is slugging of 425, an OPS of 724, and just 1 plus more on the OPS plus is at 92, where Tapia's was at 91, according to Baseball Reference. So not like there was too massive of a gap between their performance, but the big issue for, or at least when it comes to the Rockies, when they were having Raimel Tapia, was that ground ball percentage. And while Grichuk, not better this year in terms of ground ball percentage. He hit the ball on the ground a ton this year. I'm going to see if I can get that. Here we go. Highest ground ball percentage of Randal Grichuk's career was this year. He hit the ball on the ground 50% of the time, finished the season with a 50.4%. That was an almost 10, that's a little over 10% increase. It's 39.7% ground ball percentage in 21, 42% in 2020, 39. It was a pretty big jump for him this year. Now, one of the interesting things with Grichuk will be a new hitting coach. He went into a new program and a new hitting coach. We'll see what that means for the Rockies. But let's compare it to Raimel Tapia's ground ball percentage, which was a big detriment to Raimel Tapia. The big issue with Raimel last year and throughout his time in Colorado was he couldn't leave the ground. He was just hitting the ball on the ground a ton. Tapia dips to 53.3% with a fly ball percentage of 18%. And Grichuk had a much better ability to put the ball in the air at 26%. So the trade still kind of makes sense for the Rockies, and I think the Blue Jays as well. I mean, I think the Blue Jays weren't figuring out what they could do with someone like Grichuk, and they didn't need necessarily to lean on home runs when they have a team full of people that can hit home runs. So they went and did someone in Tapia who a little more defense, speed as well. That's one nice thing for him, and his ability to just put the ball in play and get on base there. But he almost had a career high in home runs, Tapia, this year, 2 away from his career high, and but 100 innings less this year. So we did see a decrease in playing time. So one thing too, Raimel Tapia, he struck out 81 times this year, and Randal Grichuk, on the other hand, struck out 127 times. That's a massive, massive difference there. 16 walks for Tapia this season compared to 24 walks from Randal Grichuk. That is Tapia is someone that's going to get on base in a different way, isn't going to go down on strikes so much. And when your hope for Grichuk is for him to be someone that's contributing on your offense, and he strikes out 127 times, one of the highest in his career, but in a career that is full of triple-digit strikeout years, that's one thing that's a step back. It's nice to see Tapia not striking out. 81 strikeouts is compared to 127. Massive difference. What is that? 46. That's 40. He struck out 46 more times than Tapia in about 100 and was 100. About 105 more at bats. I mean, that's a significant ratio there. Over a quarter of the extra at bats that Grichuk had to Tapia were strikeouts. And we saw Grichuk strike out in crucial times for the Rockies. And something that I hope all the Rockies get better for next year is striking out less. And holy smokes, Grichuk has got to be one of those players. Now, one of the things that was a surprise about Randal Grichuk that I didn't expect this year that's going to keep him around, especially in right field, in addition to the offensive stats we talked about, is the defense. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But before we do that, as everyone knows, athletes rise and fall in the ranks. But when it comes to saving money, SimpliSafe always stays on top. And right now, you can save big with SimpliSafe Home Security. They're giving listeners 40% off their advanced security system. SimpliSafe was just named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News. And because at SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. With 24/7 professional monitoring when a threat is detected, SimpliSafe's monitoring professionals promptly contact you and dispatch first responders to your home, even if you're away or unable to respond. 24/7 professional monitoring costs under $1 a day. That's less than half the cost of ADT's traditional professional installed plans. And SimpliSafe blankets your home with protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. They have HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Our monitoring experts Use proprietary, I should say, response technology to visually confirm when a break-in is real, so you can get the highest priority police dispatch. Don't miss on this chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb today. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. Simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb today. Go today. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. One thing that was nice about Raimel Tapia, or I should say Randal Grichuk this last year, was he was a good defender. I mean, he was actually someone that the Rockies, he made some big plays for the Rockies. His fielding percentage here overall in the outfield for the Rockies here, 981 fielding percentage, a few errors as well. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean. It wasn't exactly, but he did have some good diving stops and had some big plays that came up for the Rockies there. But unfortunately, he wasn't someone necessarily that was an overabundance of a great fielder, but he was solid out there and someone that was a little bit more solid of a defensive position player than, say Charlie Blackmon. But it's interesting when you look at it, compared to four of his errors were committed in right field compared to center field. He had one error in center field, but he also doubled the amount of games that he played in right field versus center. So Grichuk is a fine piece to hold over with while you figure out what's going on with Charlie Blackmon and what you're going to figure out with right field, especially as what does the young guys coming up mean? How much of an impact is that going to change things for the Rockies, and especially Randal Grichuk when you make this trade? It wasn't necessarily a big high value trade. Raimel Tapia's time with the Rockies, and especially after the 21 season, you really didn't know what the Rockies were going to do with him. And you really didn't know what the Rockies were going to do with some of these other players as well, especially with some that came up and were playing really good ball. Daza at the end of 21, Connor Joe at the end of 21. Those all impacted Tapia getting chances. So when we want to look back and we look at this trade, it still makes sense. And I still think the Rockies can get more from Randal Grichuk, but it's time to see Randal Grichuk make an adjustment at the dish. I mean, he hasn't been able to do so necessarily about his career, but to have deep into over 100 strikeouts each season is probably the norm of what we're going to see from Randal Grichuk. And that's not something I'm really going to be excited about going forward. There's just not something, there's just not a future for that. And it's just can't be the way the Rockies operate. It is imperative. It is so important for the Rockies to cut out on strikeouts. But will that be enough? I mean, just listen to some of these numbers, and when you and compare these to the Rocky. I mean, and think about what these players play in terms of the role in offense. 164 strikeouts from CJ Cron, 158 from Ryan McMahon, 127 from Randal Grichuk, 109 from Charlie Blackmon, and 101 from Brendan Rodgers. Those five players are a huge part of your offense. Most of, if not all of your offensive production last year came from those players. So that can't be a continuing issue. There's clearly some issues with the Rockies when it comes to striking out, and hopefully with a new approach and a new hitting philosophy, it's going to benefit players like Grichuk, because when you're looking again at strikeouts, Randal Grichuk's right up there. But let's also take a look at RBIs for the Rockies this season, who led the team. He's up there in the top 3 of RBI generators, but that's another disappointing thing for the Rockies with how bad and how low their offensive production was. Grichuk is 3rd in the Rockies in RBIs. It's 73 this year. Rockies have to be scoring more, and it's got to be coming off the bat of someone like Randal Grichuk. So keeping it going through the numbers here and qualifying for the Rockies, it's someone who is Grichuk in the middle of the pack and towards the lower end of the Rockies when it comes to on-base percentage as well. So there's a couple of stats that you see Grichuk at the top of, which is awesome. But I'd really like to see for me to feel more confident, more excited, and more pumped up about Grichuk is for him to come out next year with leaving the yard a little bit early, a little bit more frequently, and cutting down on the strikeouts. And it's going to benefit all of the Rockies to cut down on strikeouts because it's just simply ridiculous when you look at these strikeout totals. And for 5 out of your usual batters to be in triple-digit strikeouts this year, strikeouts are up. Pitchers are really good right now. It's really easy to strike out. The way baseball is being played right now, the strikeout is a massive role. But discipline at the plate is not only going to help the Rockies, it's going to help Grichuk. And if Grichuk can cut down on the strikeouts and increase a little bit and get on base more, he's fine. And he's really a nice, solid utility player for the Rockies. There's not a negative WAR player, not a super high WAR player, but when a player like Grichuk doesn't finish with a negative WAR, that means he's a fine utility player. He's someone that you don't mind putting in right field for the Rockies, and he's a good option to have for the club. I just think and what's nice about Grichuk is we've seen more from him, at least on other teams. So that means we can hope for a little bit more and maybe hope that this new hitting coach can tap in to what works for Grichuk and get him able to hit the ball on the ground less this year. I agree. Rock's hot takes. He needs to be better at keeping the ball off the ground, and especially when the trade that he came over for was someone who hit the ball on the ground a lot. I mean, the Rockies not only turned a lot of double plays, but hit into a lot of double plays. But at Rock's hot take says, I like Grichuk, a solid player, but he did not do his job this year. He needs to have better contact off the ground. Yeah, that's a good summary of what Randal Grichuk was this year for the Colorado Rockies. His job was to come here and to hit home runs, keep the ball off the ground. Kind of did it, and kind of fell into some of his old usual traps. But again, we could see more, which is good. And it's not like he signed for a long-term deal. And really, like we said, with Tolia, with Bouchard, those are your two options. With Daza, with Bryant, with Blackman, you're gonna have to figure out something there. But that's fine depth. I'm okay with the Rockies' outfield depth next year, starting off with Bryant, Daza, Blackman, Bouchard, Grichuk, and Tolia. Tolia most likely going to go play some first base as well. But Tolia was getting outfield experience. There's plenty more outfielders that could be doing stuff as well. So, okay. So we'll see more. I think this trade still makes sense for the Rockies. I still think this was a good move for the Rockies. But like we said, sum it all up, Randal Grichuk can do more and hopefully will do more for the Rockies. Quick little World Series talk. Just diving in on what I think is actually a fascinating World Series. And we'll talk about that next. Hey, Locked On Rockies can be your first listen of the day, and we appreciate it. Why don't you make Locked On Sports today your second listen of the day? You can check that out there. Just search Locked On Sports today, and you can be following all sorts of stuff in the world of sports. And a big thing that's happening in the world of sports is the World Series. Big deal. And I think this is a good World Series. I actually really do. This is two really interesting storylines here as the Astros, as much as you might want to hate them, as much as you want to fight the any positives that they do and things of that nature, they've assembled a legit team. Until something comes up, they're doing it the legit way, and they're really good. And they're doing it in an exact opposite way from the Rockies. They are dominating from the bullpen. Their bullpen is lights out and electric, but it's going up against a classic juggernaut on the other side. The Phillies have just hit better than anybody in the postseason, it seems. They hit home runs. Bryce Harper is on a tear. It's going to be really interesting to see, and I'm really curious to see what teams that play in the NL West or not the NL West, the AL West, and play the teams like the Astros a lot are going to learn from watching a team like the Phillies go up against this stacked bullpen. How do you respond to such great pitching, not only starting pitching but into the bullpen? The Phillies have they went all in on good offense, and it's paid off. Schwarber, Castellanos, Harper, just to name some of the three big ones. I haven't followed the Phillies enough to really know each one of the players that are going in there, but I know that Kyle Schwarber has hit 1,000,000 home runs, and I think he's like hits 1,000,000 home runs and strikes out 1,000,000,000 times. But the Phillies bounce back. There's something in that they have the baseball magic. They have the team that's rolling, team that's playing the best baseball at the right time. In addition to, on the other side, the Astros are doing that as well, but it was expected. It's expected for the Astros to be here. It was expected for the Astros to be this good going into this season. The Phillies, on the other hand, I don't think people are saying it's a lot of Rocktober kind of vibes. I'm thinking, yes, there's there, but the Phillies have a little bit more substance to their team there. They got some really good pitching on that team as well. They don't play the best defense, but I love when you're getting your two sides of the coin. The Astros can score. Yes, the Astros have offense. Absolutely. But the Astros have been winning games by one home run in the right time a lot in this postseason. 1, 2 big hits. That's really all they've used. Whereas it's been bouncing back and forth, getting back into ball games from the Phillies nonstop this season or this postseason. What does that mean when these two go ahead? And I think it's going to be a much more entertaining series than we think if the Phillies can hit. If the Phillies get blown away by the pitching in those first two games and they got to dig out of a hole, that's going to be an interesting way. Can they come back there? But on the flip side, Phillies have had the offense this postseason, something that other teams have not been able to say during their postseason runs. Great pitching, great offense coming together, and I think it's time now that we recognize that Bryce Harper always has been and still will be really, really good. He's a very, very good baseball player, and he's going to be on the biggest stage. We'll see what he can do. Folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day and tuning in. Thank you to Kenny Gwinland Jr. and at Rocks Hot Takes for popping into the Rocks Talk line, yeah, aka the Locked On Rockies live chat. You can see when we go live by subscribing to Locked On Rockies on YouTube, and we're free and streaming on your favorite streaming service. Just search Locked On Rockies and you're going to find all of what we do. You can find us on Twitter at LO Rockies. You can find me at Paul Holden 33. Like we said, we're on YouTube as well. Locked On Rockies, that's where you got to go. And now that you made us your first listen of the day, why don't you go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast or keep up to date with all things Colorado sports with the Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, and Locked On Nuggets podcasts. And until next time, I'm Paul Holden saying so long